We're joined by two guests. One of them is Kungu. She's a partnerships manager at CFK Africa. And Eddah Ogogo is the program coordinator for public health at the same organization, CFK Africa. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Karibu sana to Kenya's biggest conversation. Welcome to the hot seats of the Situation Room. You're okay?
Yes.
Now, the conversation, of course, begins with the very first thing, which is who is CFK Africa? And I was going to start with you, Eddah.
CFK Africa is a non-governmental organization that has been established since 2001. I'd let Anne give us the history of CFK Africa.
Yeah.
So CFK Africa, originally known as Carolina for Kibera. Our founding story basically was two Kenyans, one American came together to support the people of Kibera. Over the years, we have grown basically for an NGO focusing only in Kibera to now working in 25 informal settlements. Of the 1,400 documented informal settlements in Kenya, our work is mostly around issues of primary healthcare, education, and livelihoods. So when it comes to primary healthcare, we are focusing on both facility and community level health services. When it comes to education, we're supporting quality improvement within informal settlements, basically how we can ensure that children in an informal settlements have the same opportunities in education as any other child in Kenya, and also just supporting access by providing scholarships, and of course livelihoods, how we can support youths and women to pursue various pathways of economic independence. So that's CFK.
What are informal settlements? In your definition of CFK Africa?
In our definition as an organization, an informal settlement is basically any settlement that in essence was not planned for. It mostly comes up when a few people start living together, houses sprout up. Most of the time the housing infrastructure is not really well thought out. It's not really well properly built. There are no infrastructure such as hospitals and roads, and even basic things such as electricity or water is not something that's available. And also basically for the space that's also there, it's not able to accommodate the population that's available. And one of the things that you notice in Kenya is, yes, there are informal settlements, but with devolution, we've seen a rapid increase in the number of informal settlements. And this is because with devolution, the town started to grow in the various counties. And with that, a lot of people are coming in from the rural side to where mostly the main city within that county is. And because of obviously with devolution, it was a bit rushed. Infrastructure was not really improved for most of the central locations. So people are coming in with the hope for jobs. And then that's how now more informal settlements are popping up within those areas. And as an organization, basically, we are focusing on 8 counties. That's where we have the most rapidly growing informal settlements, such as Nairobi, Nakuru, Kisumu, Mombasa, Kiambu, Kajiado. So those are the sort of settlements that we're aiming for basically in counties to work with.
So do I hear you to be saying that informal settlements by and large are structures or houses that are put up in land that these individuals don't actually own? So essentially they are there illegally?
Some of them is land that's owned.
Okay.
So you have your property, you have a few structures. Luckily, it's near the town, or the main town of the location where you're living. So you will start putting up houses rapidly. And then also now, because land ownership also is quite a bit complex in Kenya, there's some it's communal land, it's not really individual land as well. So even there, they're putting up structures to live in. So really land tenure is quite different in various informal settlements. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's about now, you may own the land, but you're putting up structures, hombela.
And
without approvals, without looking at the standards.
Eric, whose approvals? When I put up, I've approved that I should put it up. That's why I'm putting it up.
Of the planners.
But there's planners in how it's
So it doesn't meet the laid down regulations for what comprises, say, a house.
Exactly.
So the building codes and what have you.
Have not been adhered to.
Yeah, and other amenities such as water, electricity, sewerage, it's all that.
So, looking at these informal structures, these informal settlements, is there a link then between this mode of living and
Mm-hmm.
habitude and teenage mothers?
Yes and no. Now, with informal settlements come a lot of other social challenges. So basically, people who are coming in there are looking for employment. So unemployment is quite low. Basically, getting the daily needs.
Unemployment is high.
Is high.
Yeah, okay.
Unemployment is high. Sorry for that. We don't have any proper, basically, facilities to support the needs for the people. That comes with also a lot of frustration. There are no health services. There aren't enough schools. And so what happens with that is there is now, number one, from the girl's perspective, they're not accessing the required health services and health information. So you're a teenager, you're exploring your body, you're coming to yourself. So what happens naturally is if you're not well informed, obviously they will experiment, and that's how they'll end up pregnant. On the flip side as well is if that's not the case, that's as to what is happening is issues of gender and just power plays, and how generally in society women tend to be taken advantage of more. So in cases where there's such unsettled, just in informal settlement, there's not a lot of peace. There's just a lot of conflict that is continuously happening there. So a lot of violence is happening. Women and children are the ones who get affected more. And then now sexual and gender-based violence is high. So the girls also get pregnant as well. And similarly, also because of economic issues, the girls really, it's not even an issue of experimenting. It's a means to make your day-to-day, to meet your day-to-day needs. And then now you'll have risky sex, and then you'll get pregnant as well. So it's a myriad of issues, but we can't say it's only in informal settlement, because in the rural areas, issues of income also are a challenge. So generally, any community that's vulnerable, they are more likely that there will be higher cases of teen pregnancy. Yeah.
But we are seeing, are we saying, look, if you're just taking a snapshot from those 8 counties that you speak of, do we see that in these informal settlements, there is then a high number of teen mothers?
There is.
Okay.
And the funny thing is, though, teen pregnancy is not an issue now. It's not like right now is when we've had ridiculous increase in numbers of teen pregnancies. It's been there. But generally, teen pregnancy, even from when we were really young, it comes with a lot of shame and stigma. So such things tend to be hidden away. So the girl, when she gets pregnant, she'll be hidden away somewhere with her grandparents and aunt. Keep it a secret. We are not going to the clinics anyway. Even right now, most teen moms go only for their ANC, the 4th clinic. So numbers were not really showing the true magnitude of what was happening. But now with increased emphasis around issues of health, there's definitely more attention around issues of research within communities. So that's what's coming out more. Especially even now when the Ministry of Education also started to track pregnancy, why girls are not coming to school, issues of dropping out. So that's what brought it out. But generally, we're not saying it wasn't there. It was there. But now, basically, visibility around it is what now has made it a prominent and obvious visible issue. Yeah.
Eddah, so the work that you do as CFK Africa and looking at these teenage mothers, what is it that you do to support them? Because you're talking about supporting the teenage mothers.
Yes. For the longest time, the health system did not have structures that supported adolescents and youths, and teen mothers fall under the adolescent group. And till recently, there was no structures encouraging youth-friendly health services, and CFK Africa set up such an entity. So we have a youth-friendly center that focuses on the health and well-being of adolescents. So we run a comprehensive antenatal clinic for these youths that we encourage them to come for their 4 visits. And it's quite encouraging. You'd find the youths are able to come. And therefore, we are able to monitor them. We're able to monitor their children. And we have better health outcomes. Looking at when they come just at delivery because they've been hiding somewhere for fear of stigma, or they come at the 4th visit, or when now they feel like maybe I should have done something before I go in for delivery. There are several complications that come with it. They didn't take some of the medication, they did take some of the precaution, and now they suffer anemia because of their nutrition status as well. They have very poor outcome for the infants, and we are continuing a health problem into a new generation. So when a child is already born with problems, then that child also grows with bigger problems, and it's like a continuity of health issues. But you see, when we catch them early, and that is why CFK Africa set up that entity, and it run by youths for the youths in a confidential way. It's quite accessible by the youths. It's quite affordable for them to go and access that center. And we are trying to also give information out there so that they can be able to know that once I fall pregnant, it's not the end of life. There's something I can do for myself and my unborn child so that we can both have healthier outcomes. Most of the postpartum issues are worse in younger women compared to the older ones. And it's worse in teenagers because their bodies are not fully developed to carry a child. Their pelvis is not fully developed to deliver a child. So at the end of the day, this girl would turn out to be a sick mother, poor postnatal outcomes. The child will also have very poor life outcomes. So it's so many issues. That is what we as CFK Africa are trying to
So you
monitor.
set up a facility
Yes.
in each of the informal settlements in the 8 counties that you operate in, or is it a centralized facility?
We have a facility in Kibera, and one strategy that we're using in all the other counties where we have expanded to is the health system strengthening. There's already an existing youth center or an angle, a room that has been set aside for the youths because, of course, youth-friendly centers are either targeted or integrated. So if it's targeted, it's just for the youths and only for the youths. And if it's integrated, then it's in a facility and then there's a portion that's set aside for the youths. So strengthening them so that they can be able to have confidentiality, access, affordability, welcoming staff that youths and adolescent girls would feel very comfortable to go and talk to, strengthening them to do better reports, just ensuring the girls, when they go to these facilities, are able to be happy to be served there. And they would come back and tell another girl, you know what, you can actually get help if you go to this health facility. So the setup is only for Kibera, but the support in terms of strengthening happens in the other counties that we are in.
So when a girl falls pregnant, and like Anne, you said, one of the big issues that this young girl will face is the stigma. Number one, there's a fear of actually saying, I'm pregnant.
Yes.
And this is telling the adults in the homestead. So how do you support this child so that they can, first of all, say, I'm pregnant, and then they'll gather the courage to come to the facility or to be brought to the facility or to be saying, I'm actually going to the facility, don't look for me.
Okay. So now that particular service actually now comes in through our community level interventions or school level interventions. So what Eddah has covered is quite a lot more on the facilities, either our health facilities or the other government facilities that we cover. So at the community level, what we do is basically we set up what we call safe spaces. And this is where we encourage within every certain location. Let's say in Kibera, for example, we have villages. In other informal settlements as well, such as in Mombasa, in Kilifi also, there are little villages. Let's say in Kaloleni, there's a couple of villages there. So you encourage setup of a safe space. And a safe space for us basically is any space. It's a physical space. It's a psychosocial space. It's an emotional space that you feel safe. So we form these groups, and then these groups is just a bunch of adolescent girls, and then we link them to what we call their mentor. This is someone slightly older but not too old, so there's that relatability of youth. So maybe if it's a group of 15-year-olds, their mentors tend to be anywhere between 18 to 23. So that they're still relatable. And then now at these sessions is where we're encouraging girls to open up. And as we are cascading information and just empowering these young girls, they also have a network of friends. And we always are continuously encouraging them, every now and then bring along your friend. And so we create that sense of home, that sense of comfort, so that the girls now can come to us. And over time, what you realize is the girls now start opening up. Oh, I have a friend, she's pregnant, so and so. And then we'll go there and intervene. So what we do, essentially, as Ed has mentioned, issues of confidentiality is very important. So the first thing we take care of is the mental health of this girl, because you have to imagine that they are going through a dual development challenge where you barely are done growing up to be an adult, you're still a young girl, and then you're a mother now. So there's a lot of conflict with that, and that's why even just going to tell your mother, and on top of the shame and the stigma you'll experience. So after we've calmed her down, we've got into a good space, we seek consent for her. Where she needs it, we will go with you and tell your parents with you. So then that kind of support is provided. And then after that, also now you have to take the parents, because for every teenage mom, the biggest, I would say, influences of how she handles things moving forward is either the parent, the school, or the community at large. So the number one concern first is to take care of the home situation. Because what happens is mostly for most girls, immediately they get pregnant, especially in informal settlements that we work with, it's either she will be forced to get married, so that now you go and take care where you got that child from. Number two, she will be kicked out. We have quite a huge number of child-headed households, and most of them are teen moms who've been kicked out to go fend for themselves because parents will not be associated with that shame.
Yep.
Then the third alternative is she might stay in the home, but it will be completely toxic because you're continuously reminded as to how much you're ashamed, how you have failed
And
your
the
parents.
failure.
Yeah.
And it's really unbearable. So how do we take care of that situation at home? Then the second phase now we transition to is to education. Because in Kenya currently, 1 in 5 girls is either pregnant already or has had a child already. And of those girls, by around 2018, about 16% of them drop out of school. And all the 16% that drop out of school, only 2% of the 16% that dropped out ever return to school. They don't go back to school. And the reason they don't go back to school is the same thing, issues of stigma, and also the lack of follow through by a number of schools on basically allowing the girls their right to education.
Come back.
So when at the school level, you are being shamed, continuously used as the example of the bad seed, the one who is coming to spoil all the other girls within the school.
Yep.
So that environment becomes unbearable, you go home. Some schools actually go to an extent where they actually just kick them out. Openly, you're told, do not come back, you're now a mother. Schools are not for mothers. We saw such conversations happen also, for example, in Tanzania, where there was a lot of mention that they should not be there because now they're mothers. So how do you support not only now the school in realizing the challenges that come around teen pregnancy, but also making them realize that it's an obligation, it's a right. You cannot deny them. It's in the Children's Act. We have the school re-enrollment policy. We have the gender policy. All those things are legalities that are laid down that if a girl gets pregnant, she's entitled to her
come back.
education.
Yeah.
You can't deny her that.
The challenge I see, sorry, Siti, before you come in, it's just a follow-up to this, is with CFK Africa itself.
Yes.
So you're positioning yourselves as this organization that is really supporting these adolescents, that's also supporting them in the journey through pregnancy and motherhood. So then you're branded by the community, I see, as you're the guys who are actually encouraging these girls to get pregnant.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
That is true. You do get encouraged. We do get blamed for
Branded.
encouraging girls to be pregnant. However, in terms of our programming when it comes to adolescents, we have 2 core areas. Now, our primary goal is to prevent pregnancy to start with. So we try to start working with the girls from as young as 9 years old. So at 9 years old, they have some level of understanding and comprehension when you start explaining to them issues about their body, their development, self-awareness, work with them about self. So we start pretty young from around 9 years, and we try to engage them for at least 2 to 3 years. So by the time they're 11, if you caught you at that point, there's a lot of information. Then we're also working with the schools to increase that information. So now, however, if that does not really work, and sadly the reality is CFK Africa as an organization, even the UN, you cannot get to every single girl. You can't. There is nobody that can. So what will you do for the girls who sadly end up getting pregnant that young? We will not discard them. Someone must intervene, and you must stand with them. And because basically we can't really lose a whole generation just because of a pregnancy, while in essence, if she's given the support that she requires, she can go back to school and achieve all the goals that she wanted in her life. We have so many women in leadership roles that have been teen moms, and that has been possible. So that's why for us, yes, we intervene for them, but we're not really advocating for it. We are intervening for the ones that are often left behind.
The ones that just come through the cracks.
Yes.
Let's do this. Let's take a break. Okay? Take a look at the weather and traffic. City has like 17 questions lined up. We'll start with the first 2 after the break. and then Ndu has 17 others. We'll go with the first two. Well, 9:30. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. We're talking about supporting teenage mothers in informal settlements. And an organization called CFK Africa has been doing this in various informal settlements across 8 counties in the country. And Kungu is a partnerships manager at CFK Africa. And Eddah Ogogo is a program coordinator for public health on this particular one.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Girls don't impregnate themselves.
Yes.
Now, the niche you've carved for yourself is an important one. In fact, it's an extremely important one. But there are other people who also, other NGOs, other organizations that work in the same space, but their focus is perhaps on the boy child. You talk about getting young girls, and I have to throw in young boys as well, because the knowledge that you hope to impart to the girls, if the boys don't have that information, you are getting into a gunfight with a rungu.
Yes.
Great.
The knowledge that is required is something that can actually be inculcated in people from a very early age. Curriculum, as they are taught from primary school at a certain age, these are some of the things that they are taught, because life skills, things with which one can then, having acquired, cope well with life. In the absence of that symbiotic relationship between the boys getting informed, the girls getting informed, yes, you will do what you're doing and you will do it well, but we will not have given this particular matter the 360 attention that it actually requires.
Yes.
Question. Organizations that support and can help you do this work, do you engage with them? Because you are talking about providing a cure, and I'm talking about prevention.
Yes.
You work on prevention, but it's like 180 degrees.
Yes.
Now, how do we get the other 180 so that it is now 360?
Now, I'll talk about how we come in with the boys, and then I'll let Anne bring in the aspect of how we work with the others, and also our community aspect on how we come in with the boys. Now, we approach the boys' mentorship through 3 fronts. One, I talked about a youth-friendly center. As much as I said, we have an establishment that has takes care of the needs of the youths, the adolescents in the center in terms of antenatal clinic. It also does more. So it's we use an approach that is youth targeted, adolescent targeted. So these adolescents can come in and access any type of service, both clinical and non-clinical. And in so doing, we also attract the boys. They have sessions there, they'll have life skill sessions, and they have mentorship sessions. We also have sessions in schools where we have our youth providers in the organization reaching out to these boys in schools through the school health clubs. So in the school health clubs, it has both girls and boys. They talk to them through the developmental milestones, what they go through as young boys, as young girls, so that each groups understand how it happens. The third thing, as much as Anne talked about the safe spaces that we run for girls, we also have boys' safe spaces where we talk to boys about boys to men. And Anne will pick up from there.
Yes. So as part of the SDG strategies, especially around gender equity, male involvement is one of the recommended approaches for achieving gender equity, which is something we adopt. So yes, there's the aspects of what we do with the boys. And actually, we've collaborated with mentorship around the Man Enough cohorts, and we usually get a number of men from those cohorts to come and volunteer and talk to us. Now, then there's also now provision of health services from that perspective, as well in health information. Then secondly, also, we have fathers-only sessions. Because what we realize also is for a young boy, if you're living in a house with your parent, with your father, we will probably have you at maximum, maybe an hour, 2 times a week, max. the rest of the time you're with a teacher or you're at home. So we need also to have conversations with the fathers to reshape their perception around a lot of issues of not only men but also girls as well, so that whatever conversation we are having with them within the school or within our facilities can also be repeated at the household level. So for us, when it comes to male involvement, we're very critical, and it cuts across. And probably the reason why we don't mention is, if I was to sit here and tell you everything we do, we would require 3 hours just just to cover the entire aspect of programming. But critical, very, very critical to have male involvement. I completely agree.
How would you compare the numbers of teenagers, young girls who have been spoken to prevent pregnancy vis-a-vis those who are pregnant? Which is in the majority?
Those that have been spoken not to get pregnant.
Okay.
So at the highest numbers in terms of beneficiaries, let's say we had 2021, we had an average of about 2,500 girls that we were dealing with. And of those, only 300 were teen moms. Now, the thing also you have to realize is that's just in our one catchment in Kibera. But by and large, also even with teen pregnancy from national data, it's 1 out of 5. So for every one girl who is pregnant, 4 are not. So the ideal situation is that's about 20% of the population of girls. So if we can get at least less and less numbers that are pregnant, even better for us.
Okay.
For health, education, and all other outcomes.
So I can understand the advocacy that goes into place,
Yes.
then being able to speak to them and do, pre-action counseling kind of thing. What support then is given to the girls who are pregnant, who have fallen pregnant, and then either have to continue living with their parents, talking about the shelters, places that they can go to. Beyond that, what happens? Walk through the life cycle of this pregnancy and then having the child and then having to continue with life.
So for us, what happens is we try to catch them as early as possible, around just immediately when you deliver, because more often than not, number one, they are more likely not to have started re-engaging sexually, and number two, they are pretty fresh out of school. So that feeling of being a student is still there, which is very critical if you're going to re-enroll her back. So when it comes to health services, the first thing we do is we are going to start having conversations with the parent and with the girl around issues of family planning, specifically long-term contraceptions.
Okay.
So in Kenya, you are not legally allowed to give a child contraceptive.
Yeah.
There must be consent. So for us, I would say that is the number one challenge we have when it comes to intervening.
Yes.
Because, so this girl is 16. Actually, our youngest mom has been 12 years. That's the youngest girl we had deliver. Wow. So she's at that age. She's 16, she's 13, she's 14. The parents, some of them are still not grasping the reality that their child is a sexual being who is now sexually active. We cannot hide our heads. We must deal with the reality in front of us. So how do we prevent another pregnancy?
Right.
And long-term contraceptive becomes the first option, because that's 5 years you're sure that girl will not be getting pregnant, because that's just additional challenges we don't need. Now, after that also, now we start having conversations about education. Now, from our work with teenage moms over the last 4 years, a trend that we have observed, Dave, is the minute a girl gets to the 3rd, 4th, 5th year out of school, it becomes harder to convince her to go back to school.
Yeah.
Really hard. Because number one, she started to earn some money here and there, regardless of how it's done. And she's also gotten that feel of being an adult, independence. You know, school is structure and rules. Something that now, getting your mind back to it becomes very hard. So at that early age now, we're starting to have conversations about education, because we want her young, we want her when she still feels like a student to go back to school. So you're having conversations with the parents not only about her education, but also stepping up to take responsibility for the child. Because of all our teen moms we've had, almost 90% of them, their parents' number one reason as to why she cannot go back to school is who will take care of the child. But in essence, if you spend time enough with them, you realize it becomes the easiest excuse. Reason being, you don't have a lot of income. you probably have 4, 5, 6. We have households that we work with that have an upwards of 10 children.
Yeah.
So now you actually now have one person you don't have to think about their school fees. So that becomes an easy option to say, let her take care of the child, we deal with the others. So but now we bring them to the reality of having her stay at home is just adding a burden to you, because otherwise she could go to school, make some money and be independent, and you no longer have to worry about providing for her. So one of the ways in which we also provide support is we provide scholarships to those girls. So we are having the conversation with the parent is, if we pay for her school fee,
will you allow it? Will you take care of the child?
Exactly. Because the same money you'd have been paying for her school fees, it's even less for the baby. So now we are supporting each other. And then now the second stage also is, how can we work with this household to support the economic status of this household? Do we need to have conversations around financial literacy? Is there something that could be done better to bring a bit more stability? Because number one, there's one child's school fees you don't have to think about.
Right.
With all the other income you're having, how can we walk through and bring some stability here? Because basically after Form 4, she will still be in that household.
Yep.
Then the third step also is around a lot of psychosocial support. This is for the parents and for the girl as well. Now, for the parents, it's just mostly an issue of acceptance, so that they're able to support and take care of their child. Now, for the girl, it depends with the circumstance of her pregnancy. If it was sexual violence, that requires a bit more additional support. So we will have those girls probably go to a bit more intensive counseling, and more often than not, it's one-on-one sessions and then group sessions. If it's basically an issue of being at the experimental phase and lack of information is what led to them, we also are providing psychosocial counseling, but it's also now to an aspect of you understanding how sex is a responsibility. So if you engage in sex, you must be ready for the responsibility. And if you're not ready for the responsibility, what can we do now?
What role does poverty play in all this?
I would say poverty plays the number one role in teen pregnancy. It plays number one role. Because what you realize is, for most of the girls, they either get pregnant because there was no money and she engaged in sexual activity to get income or to get supplies or basic things that she needs as a girl. We have girls who get pregnant for something as little as a doll shoe.
Or sanitary towels.
So what we have is basically, for the teen moms, whenever we engage with them, is we have what we call is a sexual partner mapping exercise. We want to understand who you've been having sex with, and also what are the decisions that led you to engage with this sexual partner. So you realize something as small as, for 14 years of her life, she's never had a nice new shoe. And then some man somewhere, or some young man somewhere in that community, bought her a brand new doll shoe. Bought her chips and sausage. She's never had chips and sausage. And that is the one thing that got her to be soft, and then she accepted to start having sex with them. And for them, even some of them, they're not really aware. It's an issue of grooming. So where you're basically groomed slowly, small gifts here and there, and the funny thing is, for most of the men who groom them, they're not just grooming her, but the mother as well. So the mother is not aware. So you just think, oh, there's just this nice uncle, he's so lovely, he's so nice to my girl, but he's aiming for her.
Wait. The mother of this make-believe situation we're talking about.
Is it a make-believe
It's not a
situation?
make-believe
No,
situation.
I think why I'm calling it make-believe. We're being generic here. Okay? So is this a mother who's also a teenager, or is this a grown-up and an adult? How can an adult not know?
It's a grown woman who is also
Precisely,
there.
and she's a mother. How can she not know?
Not know what?
Why?
The intentions of this predator.
You see, you may think that the intentions are to you as a mother.
You will never know.
If the man is coming to your home and is coming with sukari to your home, you as a mother think, okay, so it's me he's after. But Urko on the side, he's also an uncle to this child. He's the one who's also buying the child chips. So even you, as you see the guy buying the child and your children chips, you think it's me.
It's because of me he's doing this.
It's
He's endearing
always
himself
you.
to my children as well.
Yes. It's and
now.
and also now the funny thing is, if you spend enough time, you realize now for these women, they went through more or less the same situation.
Same.
So you've been abused as well your entire life.
You've gotten where I was going with
Nobody ever told you are wrong.
Yes.
So you think it's normal. So when the same thing starts happening to your child as well, it's
a normal situation.
It's what women go
But
through.
also, there are many things that human beings do or give the impression they do or believe because it's a coping mechanism.
Yes.
The reality is a little too harsh for you to face. And since there's some benefit accruing from it, you
let it pass.
or you take the view that is easier to accommodate.
Yes.
Yes, that's true. There's also those who intentionally, they know that's what's happening. But because you're comparing now, if I stop it, then I will not get the 1,000 or so that I get here and there
every
from
day.
them. And my children have been sleeping hungry for a few days.
Yeah.
We just say
I had
no.
an addition when it
We
comes to
just say
support of these girls. Adolescents usually are grouped into maybe 3 main areas. So you'd find between the ages of 9 when the puberty sets in until the age of 13, where there's rapid growth, there's rapid changes. That's when the sexual development starts, and that is when the curiosity starts. That's why Anne mentioned we enroll mostly the younger ones because we want to catch them before the sexuality kicks in. So once you have done a lot of behavior change communication in this age cohort, you're highly likely to experience less of them get pregnant as they grow. Because now between the early adolescent years up to the age of 13, you've given them so much information, and it is the opportune moment because they're seeking to learn, they're seeking to be heard, they're seeking to find an identity. They get into the 13 to 15 year where now it's I am independent. I need to be seen. I need to start several relations. But you see, if you catch them early and give them all the information they need to get early, including the sexually transmitted infections plus HIV, which they are at a higher risk of contracting, you will have prepared this girl for the next phase of her life. 13 to 15, when now relations set in, they'll be able to make wiser choices. They'll be able to know who is a predator. They'll be able to know when it's going down south. And by the time now they are getting into adulthood, 16 to 19, they start having the adult mindset. They start thinking of leadership for themselves as a human being. They start thinking of how I want my life path to run. Then you will have impacted this life. Catching them at the opportune time in the early years gives better outcome than if you wait to catch them once they are pregnant. Unfortunately, if we do not have the peer providers, which we cannot reach all in the informal settlements or in the communities around us, then we will only see them once they're expectant. But you see, the information that we give and cascade it and hope the snowballing effects will come. And was talking about inviting their friends into the safe spaces, into the mentorship sessions that we give to them. Then we'll be able to reach out to more girls and boys, give out more information out there so that these girls can be able to make informed decisions as they grow up.
There are always peer influences.
Yes.
And there are people these young people look up to.
Yes.
And whose examples they follow.
Sure.
Do you have a program where you identify these individuals so that they can actually help you in transmitting or passing along the same message? Because it is these same groupings that perhaps have the negative influence.
Yes. Mentorship program and opportunity linkages. And it's all in the community aspect that Anne was bringing out. And when it comes to Money Enough is given by people who've gone through this. They are people in the society that these young boys will look up to. When it comes to the girls, they have mentors that we have trained and put in place. When it comes to schools, we have teachers that we have trained on the adolescent and youth program according to the guidelines that we have. And they are now the mentors. They're the people that these children look up to. Ourselves at CFK Africa, as we go to reach out to them, they're able to relate with our stories. We were once teenagers. We grew up in certain structures, different, of course. Each of us has a story, and they're able to look up to such mentors and such mentorship programs. And such kind of linkages have played a key role.
That influence that you speak of is crucial. But if you're talking about adolescents, the people to whom they look up to and who influence them are not their parents or the adults. Not really.
No.
It's the peers.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
That's
It's
Though
their peers.
those are the people who actually influence them.
Yeah, and that's why I was mentioning now in our safe spaces, we have now the mentors are their peers. It's someone a little older, but still relatable to them. And
A
also
little older by how many years? 2, 3?
so we usually prefer them to be at least 18 years.
Okay.
So they've gone through school. And the reason for that also is you want someone who can mentor them, who also has gone through school or is going into university and can be an encouraging also and a good example for them to look up to.
Do these youthful mothers also function as mentors sometimes?
Yes, they
Yes.
do.
Yes.
And trust me, they're usually the best because they scare them well. They do. Because she will come and
you see,
tell
that
them
is
the story of how she was kicked out in the middle of the night,
Yes.
6 months pregnant, and had to fend for herself for a month or two.
The reality on the ground.
So
They
that
now
it
know
tells them what happens.
it's not all
Yeah.
fun and games. There are actual repercussions.
Yes.
There's something that you mentioned, Dan, and I want to ask you, Eddah. It's about policy, law, and community perceptions and beliefs.
Yes.
Okay. Access to sexual and reproductive health services, let's call them that, including contraceptives. There's no law that allows this. So, do you participate in advocacy at policy level so that then this can happen? And how do you do that?
Yes. Each culture has a way in which they handle health. Each culture has a tradition of how a disease progression moves and how they can be able to prevent and manage any form of illness. So breaking the cultural barriers only comes as a means of communication. Stakeholder involvement is key for us. And all stakeholders, from the girls to the parents, to the community volunteers, to the Ministry of Health representatives, to the Ministry of Education representatives, all stakeholders on board are able to come together and figure out how do we break these cultural barriers.
Yeah.
At policy level, national level, having a law that now, remember, the Susan Keheka bill in the Senate.
Yeah, so advocacy becomes a very critical role now for us. And what we rely heavily on building our advocacy is around data on what we are learning as we implement our projects. And also using the government's own data, because if you're a health facility, you have access to Ministry of Health data nationally, and we will give them back their own data to prove to them why we need to reconsider some of the things. So one of the ways in which we are doing this is we are basically involved in a lot of task force, and also we support government, especially at the county level nowadays, in reviewing policies. Currently, that becomes a very critical conversation, especially when it comes to issues of sexual and reproductive health services for adolescents, because there is a review that's going through around children's rights, and they're considering that a 14-year-old can now be taken to be of legal age to go to court. Now, the question is, if we can do so, should that 14-year-old also not be allowed to decide if they can take a contraceptive as well? Because why? What's the difference? It's the same one.
The same 14-year-old.
It's the same 14-year-old. So if they can stand in court, let them also choose a contraceptives. And also, basically, currently, our sexual debut in Kenya is at 9 years. 9 years is when they're starting to have sex. We can't ignore that.
At 9 years, do they even know what sex is?
Yes.
They're exploring because their
They're
body is
exploring.
developing and their sexual being is starting to come out. So that's when it comes into play.
And
they realize-
actually, quite a number of them, they have more sexual partners and they tend to be more sexually active than adults. If you sit down and they openly tell you what they are doing, it is scary. And they are not just having sex with their fellow
With the age mates?
adolescents.
No.
It
with
is
the older.
also with the older
including
ones.
the older.
There is a lot of issues around sex parties. A good example is during COVID when there was lockdown.
Yeah.
There were a lot of sex parties in formal settlements.
Yeah.
And we had a ridiculous hike in adolescents coming in for STI screening. Because they were having orgies. There was no school. There was nothing. So that's how the kids are occupying their time. So we cannot ignore.
You've scared us
We
enough.
cannot ignore.
Let's end this conversation. Hii maneno mkutano na kuisha. Mkutano na kuisha. Anne Kungu is a partnership manager at CFK Africa. Eddah Ogogo is the program coordinator for public health. at the same organization. Let's go to the weekend. Well, but thank you very much, ladies, for coming. Thank you for all the good work that you're doing. And of course, we have a platform. It's open for you. Come and let's have this publicity and awareness and start up debate,
Definitely.
because it's important to have it.